July the 29th, 2019. Guys, this is an important video, so pay attention to it, because with our grand solar minimum decline, and it's rapidly declining, we're facing a lot of problems. You're looking at a flight over Russia from KNR. It's multiple wildfires, and now this is happening though across around the Arctic Circle in the northern hemisphere. Now, if you back out of this, and this again a plane flight, if you back out of this and look at it from space, it's amazing, but it's dangerous. It's as dangerous as a major volcano going up in the northern hemisphere, and that Arctic vortex picking up the smoke and actually circulating it around the globe in the northern hemisphere again. And let's back out from there and look at it from space satellites. Guys, this area, you can see as I dot the wildfires, and they're saying it's so dry because our shields are weak, gamma radiation is penetrating through our atmosphere, guys, and it's so dry on the ground. Lightning strikes are spreading, but all of this area, and many more of those dots than I put on the map, guys, are on fire, and it's all of this smoke that you see. It's kind of gray brown, you can tell it's wood smoke, is being pulled into this dip in the vortex, one of these vortices. This is going to travel around the globe. What does that do? It makes global cooling worse, in the same way that they've looked at during Malta minimum and the Dalton minimum. With volcanic activity going on, we had a year without a summer in the northern hemisphere. I've talked about it many times. Now finally, guys, and the scientists are starting to realize what's going on. They're saying unprecedented Arctic wildfires visible from space as global cooling looms. Now, I'm sure Al Gore has just hit the ground, probably Hillary Clinton wanting to get in on this carbon tax. But this is what we've been talking about on this channel for 5 or 6 years now. It says numerous wildfires have been ravaging the Arctic for weeks, following the hottest June ever recorded on Earth. Now the fires are so huge and intense, the smoke can literally be seen from space. And we've seen it before, like California wildfires and stuff, guys, but it would be small areas compared to a global scale. Now, why am I showing this? The Saharan air layer coming off of Africa. Just as the forest in Russia and Canada and Alaska are having problems with these wildfires, this sand layer is experiencing the same thing in the desert. It is dry. This dust is being picked up. Notice right in the middle of that, and this is your intertropical convergence zone, but right there is that second storm we were watching in the update last night that was being destroyed by the sand levels itself, but it had absorbed quite a bit. Now we're still watching the system that may now and turn north and go up over Puerto Rico. That I'm going to update that in probably less than an hour after this video goes up. I'm waiting on the 12 noon reports. It's still at a 20% chance. But as it says, satellite images show that more than 100 long-lived wildfires, with huge plumes of swirling black smoke covering most of the Arctic Circle, including parts of Russia, Siberia, Greenland, and Alaska. Guys, the area I was showing you from space is just one corner of that. You're seeing wildfires choking Alaska, and the permafrost is melting 70 years ahead of schedule. Think about this, guys. Think about what we're talking about. But again, 3 or 4 major areas. That's worse than 1 or 2 large volcanoes, because we don't know how long they're going to last. We're still in the hottest part of the year, and we're going into August, then September. And they're saying that these wildfires are burning across 11 regions in Russia. It is unusual to see fires on this scale and duration at such high latitudes in June, Parrington said, but temperatures in the Arctic have been increasing at a much faster rate than the global average, and warmer conditions encourage these fires to grow and persist once they have been ignited. Massive global fire in the northern hemisphere is what we're talking about. As this has why in the northern hemisphere, why that far north? Think about the magnetic fields and think about our shields. We've seen, just as your compass turns north, just a hand compass, those lines of magnetic lines of force from our shields are entering into the northern hemisphere and exit out the southern right now. And so with our shields weak much more, gamma radiation is pouring through. Now, he says for those worried about this climate change indicator, there's something potentially more worrisome. One of the serious correlations we see in this next solar cycle of 11 years, which actually is 11.8, guys, may be the lowest in at least 200 years, which calls for the low in a wave of 224 years to be precise. Our forecast for the next solar cycle of activity, which rises and falls, again, its 11.8 year cycle, is indeed a bearish trend, but it correlates with the ECM, which is rare. If our computer is correct, then the next solar cycle should be at least 1/3 less solar activity, and it could rise to a panic type of decline of 50% as measured in terms of sunspots. That's a rapid decline, guys. And what you're seeing with these vortices dropping around the planet because of the weakened shields, the dynamo of the Earth is not as energetic. That's what we're having. It could be very dangerous, and it changes the whole outlook of prepping to a much longer scale. But this is one of the sunspot number charts, guys, and it's measured in the number of sunspots per year, 50, 100, 150, 200. And you can see in 1990, we had reached one of the high points in this particular solar event. Now, these are 11.8 year solar cycles, and you have a low point, then it rises for about 5.5, 6 years to a peak, drops for about that long. And so in 2010, we had reached a minimum. Then we rose up into solar cycle 24, which is this line right there. And now we're coming out of it. It's supposed to bottom out in 2020, guys. We're not but a few months from there. But the next cycle is going to be less and less if you draw this chart on out. And this is, again, an older chart. But this drop can go up for about 200 years. This is coming out of a grand solar maximum. It says this analysis warns that the next cycle will start in 2020 and reach its maximum again 2025. This further warns that not of global warming, but highly volatile weather and crop failures as we hit both extremes. Exactly what we've been warning folks about. The next two cycles will be the risk of violent weather and global cooling. And if you go back 400 years, you can see how this can affect our planet. Starting in 1600, they were measuring the sunspots just by visually looking at them. You could see them. In the 1650s, we went into what was called the moderate minimum. It lasted over 100 years as it bottomed out. Look how low it is, guys, even compared to where we are dropping into now. And look how long it lasted. Instead of 11 or 5 to 6 years in the half cycles here, you're dealing with over 100 years. And some of the coldest times in modern times on the planet. Then it dipped down again in the 1800s, just really for a solar cycle and a half. But it caused the Dalton minimum. At that time, people, more people in the U.S. migrated to California because it was the summer without a year without a summer. Crops failed in the northern hemisphere. There were no grocery stores. They migrated to California again more than in the gold rush. But guys, we're watching it. Amazing information coming out now, and it's just, as I said before, a new science because we have the instrumentation, satellite visuals, things like that, to actually observe it for ourselves. It's a generation, guys, like no other that we've ever seen on this planet. But we're watching it, guys. Watch for a tropical update again, probably around lunch, Central Time. It's a heads up. Be safe.